The world, for Lyra Thorne, truly began when the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast canvas of the sky in hues of bruised plums and soft lavenders before surrendering it to the quiet majesty of night. It was then, as the first timid stars pricked through the twilight, that she felt most alive, most connected. Her small, weathered cottage, perched on a gentle slope overlooking the sleepy coastal town of Havenwood, wasn't much to look at during the day. Its white paint was chipped, its garden a charming tangle of wildflowers and seagrasses. But by night, it transformed. The domed observatory attached to its side glowed softly, a beacon of human curiosity reaching out into the cosmic unknown. Lyra had moved to Havenwood 3 years ago, fleeing the harsh, light-polluted sprawl of a city and a heartbreak that had felt as vast and empty as space itself. Havenwood, with its population barely nudging 1,000, its slow pace, and most importantly, its astonishingly dark skies, had been a balm to her weary soul. Here, she could dedicate herself fully to her life's work, observing the distant dance of nebulae, charting the birth and death of stars, and listening to the silent symphony of the universe. She was an astrophysicist, though she rarely used the title in Havenwood. Here, she was simply the stargazing lady to the few locals who knew her name, Lyra, a celestial echo in itself. Her days were often spent in a comfortable solitude, analyzing data, writing papers for obscure scientific journals, or meticulously calibrating her instruments. But her nights, those were for pure wonder. Wrapped in a thick wool blanket, a mug of steaming chamomile tea beside her, she would spend hours at the eyepiece of her powerful telescope, losing herself in the breathtaking beauty of gas clouds millions of light years away, or tracing the delicate, intricate patterns of distant galaxies. It was a kind of meditation, a profound reminder of both her own insignificance and her incredible privilege to witness such grandeur. The universe didn't judge, didn't expect, didn't betray. It simply, was seen. Sometimes she'd walk down to the small, pebbled beach, letting the cool spray of the Atlantic kiss her face while the Milky Way stretched above her like a shimmering river of diamonds. Havenwood was a place where you could still see the Milky Way, a rare and precious gift in a world increasingly bathed in artificial light. The town itself seemed to understand the value of its darkness. Streetlights were few and strategically dimmed, and locals prided themselves on their respect for the night sky. It was one of the many reasons Lyra had chosen to stay. Her life was a predictable, comforting rhythm of sunrises, which she often witnessed, bleary-eyed, after a long night of observation, and sunsets. The only deviation, the only consistent human interaction outside of the occasional online scientific conference, was her morning ritual. Or, more accurately, her pre-dawn ritual. At precisely 4:30 a.m., Lyra would descend the winding path from her cottage, the air crisp and carrying the briny scent of the sea. Her destination was the Morning Star, Havenwood's only bakery. It was a small, unassuming place with a cheerful blue door and windows that always seemed to steam with the promise of fresh baked goodness. She wasn't usually one for indulgence, but the smell that wafted from the Morning Star at that hour was an irresistible siren song. Inside, the bakery was a warm, golden haven. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting soft glows on the wooden counters, and the air was thick with the scent of yeast, cinnamon, and roasting coffee. And there, behind the counter, amidst a flurry of flour and rising dough, was Finn O'Connell. Finn was as much a part of Lyra's pre-dawn ritual as the stars themselves. He was a man of quiet competence, with strong, flour-dusted hands, a kind smile that rarely reached his eyes but always softened his mouth, and a perpetual dusting of flour on his dark, wavy hair. He was taller than Lyra, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of early mornings with a surprising grace. He always wore a simple white apron, and his movements were economical, precise, like a practiced dance. Their interactions were always brief, almost wordless. Lyra would enter, the bell above the door jingling softly, and Finn would look up from kneading dough or arranging pastries. He'd offer a small, polite nod, and Lyra would return it. She always ordered the same thing, a plain croissant, still warm from the oven, and a large black coffee. Finn would prepare it without her even asking, as if it were an unspoken agreement between them. He knew her order, and she knew his routine. He knew she preferred her coffee scalding hot, black, and strong enough to jumpstart a supernova. She knew he started his sourdough starter at 2 a.m., and that the best time to catch him for a fresh croissant was right after he pulled the first batch from the oven. "Morning, Lyra," he'd murmur, his voice a low rumble that was oddly comforting in the quiet bakery. "Morning, Finn," she'd reply, taking her coffee cup, its warmth seeping into her cold fingers. Sometimes, if she wasn't too lost in her thoughts, she'd catch a glimpse of his eyes, a startling clear blue, like the deepest ocean under a summer sky. They held a quiet intensity, a hint of something deeper, but he rarely held her gaze for long, returning to his work with a focused determination. Lyra would pay, adding a generous tip, and then she'd retreat to a small window seat, sipping her coffee and slowly, reverently, eating her croissant. From there she could watch the sky begin to lighten, the last, most stubborn stars clinging to the fading darkness like tiny, precious secrets. She liked the feeling of being in a warm human space, even if she wasn't actively participating in the conversation that sometimes bubbled up as other early risers trickled in. Finn's bakery was a gentle bridge between her solitary nights and the demands of the day. This silent routine had been their dance for 3 years. 3 years of shared pre-dawn hours, of unspoken understanding, of a comfortable, almost anonymous familiarity. Lyra found herself looking forward to it, a small, steady point of light in her largely nocturnal world. One particularly blustery Tuesday, the routine shifted. A storm had rolled in overnight, lashing Havenwood with rain and wind that rattled her windows and made her cottage creak like an old ship. She'd spent most of the night monitoring her equipment, worried about power surges, and had barely caught a wink of sleep. When the sky began its slow, bruised ascent to dawn, she was exhausted, emotionally drained. She needed her coffee. She needed her croissant. More than that, she needed the quiet, grounding presence of the morning star. But as she descended her path, she noticed something was wrong. The streetlights, dim as they were out. The usually distant glow of Havenwood was absent. A power outage. Her heart sank. Her equipment, thankfully, was on a battery backup, but the main power was essential for long-term operations. This meant a day of troubleshooting, a day of waiting, a day of disrupted research. She still walked to the bakery, a flicker of hope guiding her. To her surprise, a soft golden light emanated from the morning star. A generator. Of course, Finn would have a generator. He was nothing if not prepared. She pushed open the door, the bell jingling with a more urgent sound than usual. The bakery was a sanctuary, even more so now, its warmth and light a stark contrast to the dark, stormy world outside. Finn was there, just as always, flour dusting his hair, his hands deftly shaping loaves of bread. He looked up, and for the first time, his usual polite nod was replaced by a small, genuine smile. "Morning, Lyra," he said, and his voice held a touch more warmth than usual. "Rough night, huh?" Lyra felt a strange pang in her chest. It wasn't just the storm or the lack of sleep. It was the unexpected acknowledgement, the break in their silent ritual. It felt good. "You could say that," she admitted, moving to the counter. "Power's out up at the cottage. Everything's gone dark." Finn chuckled softly, a sound Lyra realized she hadn't heard before. "Welcome to coastal living. Happens a few times a year. Good thing I've got the old faithful rumbling out back." He gestured vaguely with a flour-covered hand. "The usual, I presume?" "Please," she said, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "And maybe a few extra croissants today, for sustenance." She attempted a weak smile. He met her gaze then, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "Long night of stargazing?" Lyra sighed, leaning against the counter. "More like worrying. The storm wasn't great for my equipment. And without power, it's a waiting game." She rarely spoke about her work to anyone in Havenwood, but today, exhaustion had loosened her tongue. Finn listened, his movements never faltering as he poured her coffee and selected 3 perfectly golden croissants. "That's tough," he said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. "What exactly do you do up there, Lyra? I mean, besides looking at pretty stars?" He handed her the bag of croissants and her steaming mug. Lyra hesitated. It was such a rare question, and usually she deflected it with a vague answer. But Finn's steady gaze, his quiet sincerity, invited honesty. "I study them," she began, finding herself explaining it more thoroughly than she ever had to a stranger. "I look for patterns, for anomalies. I'm trying to understand how stars form, how galaxies evolve. She realized she was rambling, her passion for the subject bubbling up despite her exhaustion. It's a lot of data analysis, a lot of late nights, a lot of quiet observation. Finn leaned against the counter opposite her, his arms crossed, listening intently. Binary stars, he repeated thoughtfully. So, two suns? Like in science fiction? Lyra smiled. Exactly, only much, much bigger, and much, much further away. It's beautiful, really. Two massive objects forever bound, forever circling each other. A wistful note crept into her voice. A kind of cosmic romance, I suppose. He studied her for a moment, and Lyra felt a flush creep up her neck. She hadn't meant to sound so poetic. Cosmic romance, Finn echoed, a soft smile touching his lips. I like that. Sounds a lot more interesting than kneading dough at 3 a.m. I wouldn't know, Lyra said, taking a sip of her coffee. But your bread is certainly a kind of terrestrial romance. Comforting, warm, essential. This time he genuinely laughed, a deep, rich sound that filled the small bakery and made Lyra's heart do a strange little flutter. Terrestrial romance, he repeated, clearly amused. I'll have to put that on the sign. They fell into a comfortable silence, the quiet hum of the generator providing a backdrop to the early morning sounds of the bakery. The wind still howled outside, but inside, it felt safe, warm. Lyra found herself watching Finn as he moved about, his strong hands working with such care and precision. There was an artistry to it, she realized. The way he shaped the dough, the way he arranged the pastries, the way he served each customer with a quiet respect. So, what happens if the power doesn't come back on soon? Finn asked, breaking the silence. Will your cosmic romance research be on hold? For a bit, yes, Lyra admitted, picking at a flake of her croissant. My main telescope requires a lot of power to cool its sensors and operate its tracking systems. The battery backup will keep the data safe, but I can't conduct new observations. It's frustrating. She sighed. I suppose I'll spend the day trying to figure out if there's any damage, and then, wait, maybe read a book. Or bake, Finn suggested, a playful glint in his blue eyes. I could always use an extra pair of hands for my own terrestrial romance. Lyra stared at him, surprised. The suggestion was so out of character for their usual distant interactions. And the idea of baking, it was so far removed from her world of astrophysics, of theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. I don't know the first thing about baking, she confessed, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping her. My culinary skills extend to boiling water and making a decent cup of tea. Finn simply shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. There's nothing to it, just a bit of science, a lot of patience, and a dash of love. You've got the science part down, Lyra Thorne. The thought lingered. The idea of doing something so utterly different, so tangible, so... After a night of wrestling with a storm and the unpredictable whims of electricity, the idea of creating something warm and delicious with her own hands was surprisingly appealing. Maybe, she said, a new spark of curiosity in her eyes. Maybe I'll take you up on that, Finn O'Connell, if the power stays out. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her tentative offer. The Morning Star opens at 5 a.m. I'm usually here by 2. Drop by anytime. The coffee's always on. Lyra finished her coffee, the warmth spreading through her. She gathered her empty mug and the croissant wrapper. Thank you, Finn, she said, her voice softer than usual. For the coffee, the croissants, and the company. He gave her another one of those genuine open smiles, and this time his blue eyes met hers and held them. Anytime, Lyra. As Lyra stepped back out into the blustery dawn, the world still dark and stormy, she felt a lightness in her step she hadn't anticipated. The power outage was still a nuisance, her research still on hold. But the unexpected conversation, the shared laughter, and the curious invitation had introduced a new variable into her carefully ordered universe. She looked up at the sky, now a bruised canvas of heavy clouds, concealing the stars she loved so dearly. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the familiar pang of loneliness. The warmth of Finn's bakery, the scent of fresh bread, and the memory of his kind, blue eyes stayed with her, a quiet comfort against the storm. Perhaps, she thought, as she began her ascent back to the cottage. Some forms of starlight didn't require a telescope at all. Some forms of starlight could be found much closer to home in unexpected places and in the most unassuming of mornings. And maybe, just maybe, this particular terrestrial romance was just beginning. Lyra's ascent back to the cottage was usually a brisk, solitary affair, her mind already shifting back to cosmic calculations and the intricate dance of distant nebulae. But today, with the wind whispering through the gorse and the sea, a shifting canvas of gray and silver below, her thoughts lingered on the warmth of the bakery, the earthy scent of sourdough, and the surprising clarity of Finn's blue eyes. The loneliness, a familiar companion, felt less like a heavy cloak, and more like a shawl she might be willing to shed, if only for a moment. She unlocked the cottage door, the key turning with a familiar click that usually signified the start of her private universe. Today, it felt a little too quiet. Her astronomy books lay stacked on the table, a star chart half unfurled, but her gaze kept drifting to the window, down the winding path that led to the village. She made herself a cup of tea, the steam curling into the cool air, and sat by her telescope, not to look through it, but to simply be near it, a silent sentinel to her internal shift. Finn, dashing. The name was a soft hum in her mind. She'd been so focused on the vastness above, she'd almost forgotten the intricate beauty of the world below, the simple, profound connections that made up human life. His kindness wasn't a calculated gesture, but an inherent quality, like the sun rising or the tide turning. It was grounding. And in her world of floating particles and infinite distances, grounding was a sensation she hadn't realized she yearned for. The next few days passed in a blur of stargazing nights and coffee-fueled mornings. Lyra tried to immerse herself in her work, charting a particular variable star, but distractions kept creeping in. A flicker of movement at the edge of her vision would remind her of Finn's quick, efficient hands kneading dough. The scent of her own toast would inexplicably conjure the richer yeasty aroma of his bakery. She found herself checking her phone more often, as if expecting a message, a habit alien to her usually self-contained existence. Of course, there were no messages. She hadn't given him her number, and he hadn't asked. The thought made a faint blush creep up her neck. On the third morning of Friday, she found herself descending the path again, ostensibly for more milk and bread. Her pantry certainly wasn't bare, but the excuse felt just plausible enough. The village was bustling a little more than usual, a few tourists milling about, and the scent of the sea was crisp and invigorating. As she approached the bakery, her heart gave a little flutter, a sensation she hadn't experienced since she was a teenager. It felt both utterly ridiculous and wonderfully exhilarating. The bell above the door chimed, announcing her arrival. Finn was behind the counter, laughing with an elderly woman whose arms were laden with loaves. He looked up, and his smile, warm and genuine, reached his eyes, crinkling them at the corners. "Lyra," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Good morning? Back for more supplies?" She felt a silly grin spread across her face. "Something like that. And perhaps a pain au chocolat this time. I've heard rumors." He chuckled. "The rumors are true, fresh out of the oven." He reached for a pair of tongs, his movements practiced and graceful. "How's the sky been? Any new discoveries from up on the hill?" His question, so simple and direct, surprised her. Most people either glazed over or asked a polite generic question about her work. Finn seemed genuinely interested. "It's been busy," she admitted, watching him carefully place the pastry in a paper bag. "The Perseids meteor shower is coming up soon. I'm preparing some observation data." "The Perseids," he repeated, a thoughtful look on his face. "My grandmother used to say they were wishes falling from the sky. We'd sit out on the beach, all bundled up, and watch for them." He paused, then looked at her, a spark of something unreadable in his gaze. "It's been a while since I've seen them properly. Too many early mornings, I suppose." A strange idea began to form in Lyra's mind, a tiny, tentative seed. She quickly dismissed it. Too forward. Too soon. She was an astronomer, not a matchmaker for her own heart. "Well, they're quite spectacular from the cottage," she said instead, trying to sound casual. "Less light pollution up there." He nodded, handing her the bag. His fingers brushed hers, a brief electric current that made her pull back a fraction too quickly. "I can imagine. Well, Enjoy the pain, oh chocolat, and good luck with the proceeds. She paid, her mind still reeling slightly from the touch, and mumbled a thank you. As she turned to leave, he called out, "Lyra, wait!" She stopped, her breath catching. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, intricately woven basket. "I baked a new batch of sourdough. I thought you might appreciate this one. It's got a hint of rosemary and sea salt on the house." Her eyes widened. "Oh, Finn, you really don't have to. Consider it a peace offering for disturbing your solitude so early in the morning," he said, his smile gentle. "And a thank you for inspiring me to think about wishes again." He handed her the warm, fragrant loaf. The weight of it in her hands was surprisingly comforting, a solid, tangible gift in a world she usually navigated with abstract data. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "It smells incredible." As she walked out, the bell chiming behind her, she felt a profound shift. It wasn't just a loaf of bread. It was an invitation, a gesture of connection that transcended mere commerce. He remembered her. He thought of her. He offered her something uniquely his. This wasn't just a bakery run. It was something more. Back at the cottage, she carefully placed the rosemary sourdough on her counter, next to her star charts. It seemed absurd, the juxtaposition of ancient cosmic maps and a freshly baked loaf, but somehow it felt right. She sliced into the bread, the crust crackling, and tasted the subtle warmth of rosemary and salt. It was exquisite. It tasted like home, if home were a place she hadn't quite found yet, but was perhaps just beginning to build. Over the next week, a pattern began to emerge. Lyra, under the guise of needing specific ingredients or simply a change of scenery, found herself drawn to Finn's bakery a few times. Each visit was brief, a quick exchange, a shared smile, a new baked good he insisted she try. He learned about her work, asking insightful questions about light years and constellations. She, in turn, learned about his life in the village, the rhythm of his days, the stories behind his recipes. He told her about his grandmother, a strong, wise woman who had taught him to bake and to appreciate the simple wonders of the world. One Tuesday, Lyra was particularly frustrated. Her data was showing an anomaly, a faint flicker that defied her current models. She needed a break, a distraction. Instead of the usual quick trip, she found herself lingering by the window of the bakery, watching Finn move with practiced ease behind the counter. He looked up, caught her eye, and beckoned her in. "Trouble in paradise?" he asked, seeing the slight furrow in her brow. He handed her a small cup of what smelled like spiced apple cider. "On the house. You look like you need a moment." She took a sip, the warmth spreading through her. "An anomaly," she sighed. "A star that isn't behaving the way it should. It's infuriating." He leaned against the counter, listening. "Stars have their own minds then, do they?" She chuckled. "Something like that. Or perhaps my understanding of them is flawed." "Always a possibility, isn't it?" he mused. "No matter how much we know, there's always more to learn. More to discover. Even in baking, you think you've mastered a recipe and then a slight change in humidity or a different batch of flour, and it changes everything. It keeps you humble. It keeps you humble." His words struck a chord. He wasn't trying to offer solutions, but understanding. He saw the shared humanity in their disparate crafts. "It does," she agreed, feeling a lightness she hadn't moments before. "It keeps you humble." They talked for a while longer, about the village, about the changing seasons, about the strange comfort of routine, and the thrill of the unexpected. The cider warmed her, and Finn's presence was like a steady, gentle anchor. She realized she hadn't felt this relaxed, this truly seen, in a very long time. As she prepared to leave, a thought, bolder than any she'd entertained before, bubbled to the surface. "The proceeds." "Finn," she began, her voice a little shaky. "You mentioned your grandmother and the meteor shower. The proceeds are peaking this Saturday night. If you're not too busy with early mornings, you could come up to the cottage. The view is unparalleled. I have a decent setup, and I could explain what you're seeing." She held her breath, suddenly acutely aware of how vulnerable the invitation felt. She, Lyra Vance, extending a social invitation to a baker for a meteor shower. It was ludicrous. It was wonderful. Finn's blue eyes widened slightly, a genuine surprise in them, quickly replaced by a warm smile. "Lyra, that's incredibly kind of you. I'd love to. Truly." What time should I be there? A wave of relief washed over her, so potent it almost made her knees weak. Around 9? It gets properly dark then. Just follow the path up from the village. You can't miss it. 9 o'clock Saturday. I'll bring something, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. A Starlight snack, perhaps? She laughed, a genuine, uninhibited sound. Perfect. See you then. Walking back up the path, the anomaly in her data forgotten, Lyra felt like she was floating. The cottage, usually a sanctuary of solitude, now felt like a place of potential, a space ready to welcome another. She spent the rest of the week in a flurry of activity, not just preparing for her observations, but also tidying the cottage with a new, meticulous eye. Hi. She even bought a new blanket, a soft woolen throw she imagined they could share while watching the sky. The thought made her cheeks flush. Saturday arrived, bringing with it a clear, crisp evening. Lyra set up her telescope, adjusted her chairs, and laid out her star charts. She even, after much internal debate, lit a few subtle battery-operated lanterns to create a soft glow around the viewing area. As the appointed time approached, a nervous excitement bubbled within her. What if he didn't come? What if it was awkward? What if she said something scientifically profound that sounded utterly ridiculous to him? Precisely at 9 o'clock, she heard footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took a deep breath, smoothing her sweater. Finn appeared, a silhouette against the twilight sky, carrying a large picnic basket. He was wearing a sturdy jacket, and even in the dim light, she could see the warmth in his eyes. "Good evening, Lyra," he said, his voice a balm. "Hope I'm not late. The Starlight snacks are here." "Not at all, Finn. Right on time." She gestured towards the viewing area. "Welcome to the observatory, such as it is." He looked around, taking in the telescope, the charts, the quiet efficiency of her setup. "This is incredible, Lyra. What a spot." He set the basket down and pulled out a thermos and 2 mugs. "Hot chocolate, and some shortbread I baked this afternoon. Figured it was suitably celestial." She laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "Celestial shortbread. I love it." They settled into the chairs, mugs of steaming hot chocolate warming their hands. The sky above them was a breathtaking canvas, already studded with the first pinpricks of light. Finn looked up, his head tilted back, a sense of wonder on his face. "It's even more magnificent than I remembered," he murmured. "So many stars, you forget, down in the village with all the streetlights." "That's why I came here," Lyra explained, her voice softer than usual. "To be closer to this, to study it, to understand its mysteries." She pointed. "See that bright one? That's Vega, one of the Perseids' parent stars. The meteors we're about to see are tiny dust particles, fragments from a comet, burning up as they hit our atmosphere." He listened intently, asking questions, his curiosity genuine. She found herself explaining complex astronomical concepts in simple, accessible terms, something she rarely did outside of academic circles. It felt good, sharing her passion with someone who truly wanted to hear it. As they talked, the first meteor streaked across the sky, a swift, ephemeral brushstroke of light. "There," Finn exclaimed, pointing. "A wish?" Lyra smiled. "A speck of comet dust, burning bright for a moment." But she understood what he meant. There was magic in the science, too. They watched for what felt like hours, the meteors appearing with increasing frequency, painting fleeting trails across the dark expanse. The hot chocolate was finished, the shortbread crumbs brushed away. A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the occasional, "Oh, oh," as a particularly bright meteor flashed. Lyra found herself stealing glances at Finn. His profile was illuminated by the faint starlight, his expression serene, captivated. There was a quiet strength about him, a groundedness that she found incredibly appealing. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply present, enjoying the moment, sharing in her world. At one point, as a particularly long bright meteor arced across the zenith, Finn reached out and gently covered her hand, which was resting on the armrest. His touch was warm, reassuring. "Thank you, Lyra," he said, his voice low, his gaze still fixed on the sky. "This is truly special. I haven't felt this sense of wonder in a long time." Her breath hitched. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she turned her head slightly to look at him, her heart thrumming. "You're welcome, Finn," she whispered. "I'm glad you're here." They stayed like that for a while, their hands gently clasped, the vastness of the cosmos above them, and the quiet intimacy of their shared moment below. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her, deeper and more profound than any hot chocolate could provide. It wasn't just the awe of the meteor shower, it was the quiet unfolding of something new, something unexpected, something she was only just beginning to understand. Later, as the meteor shower began to wane and the chill of the night deepened, Finn helped her pack up the telescope. Their movements were easy, synchronized. He lingered for a moment by the cottage door, the light from inside spilling out onto the gravel path. "I should head back," he said, though his eyes seemed reluctant to leave hers. "Early start tomorrow." "Of course," she replied, a pang of something akin to disappointment fluttering in her chest. "Thank you for coming, Finn. I truly enjoyed having you." He smiled, a soft, lingering smile that reached deep into her. "I enjoyed it more than you know, Lyra, and thank you for sharing your sky with me." He paused, then took a small step closer. "I was wondering, if you're free tomorrow for a slightly more terrestrial adventure? The village market is on. I could show you some of the local crafts, introduce you to a few characters." Her heart leaped. "The market? I'd like that very much, Finn." "Great. I'll be finishing up at the bakery around 11. Meet me there." 11? I'll be there." He nodded, a contented look on his face. "Good night, Lyra." "Good night, Finn." He turned and began his descent down the path, his figure gradually swallowed by the darkness. Lyra watched until he was completely out of sight, then she closed the cottage door, leaning against it for a moment, a wide, soft smile on her face. The cottage, which had always felt like a solitary observatory, now held the echoes of shared laughter, whispered observations, and a gentle, comforting touch. She looked out her window, up at the sky, still dotted with stars. The Perseids were fading now, but the light they had brought into her life felt anything but ephemeral. She thought of Finn, making his way down to the village, perhaps humming a tune, perhaps thinking of her. And she thought of the market tomorrow, a completely different kind of discovery, but one that felt just as exciting, just as full of potential. Lyra Vance, the woman who had dedicated her life to the cosmic dance of distant stars, was finding herself drawn, irrevocably, to the simple, profound dance of human connection. Her universe, once defined by light years and nebulae, was expanding to include the warmth of a baker's smile, the scent of fresh bread, and the quiet promise of a shared morning. She still had so much to learn, so much to explore, both in the vastness above and in the uncharted territories of her own heart. The night was deep, but a new dawn was surely on its way, bringing with it the sweet anticipation of a new day, and a new chapter in her unfolding terrestrial romance. The quiet promise of a shared morning bloomed into a radiant certainty when Eris awoke. The sun, a familiar star in the vast cosmic theater, felt different today, its light filtering through her window pane with a surprising warmth that seemed to reach beyond her skin and into the nascent stirrings of her heart. She lay for a moment, tracing the patterns on her ceiling, a faint, unfamiliar smile playing on her lips. Her mind, usually a whirlwind of complex equations and astronomical data, was unusually quiet, save for a recurring image: the baker's kind eyes, the gentle curve of his smile, the comforting aroma of fresh bread. A new dawn indeed. She rose, moving with an unusual lightness. Her morning routine, typically a precise and utilitarian sequence of actions, felt imbued with a subtle anticipation. She chose her clothes with a fleeting thought for something beyond mere comfort, something that felt approachable. The walk to the bakery, usually a brisk exercise in reaching her caffeine fix, became a stroll, her gaze sweeping over the waking town with a newfound appreciation for its simple charm. The dew-kissed grass, the chirping sparrows, the distant rumble of the first delivery truck, all seemed to hum with a gentle melody she hadn't noticed before. As she pushed open the bakery door, the familiar symphony of warmth, yeasty sweetness, and roasting coffee enveloped her, but today it felt like an embrace. The baker was already behind the counter, arranging a display of golden croissants. He looked up, and his smile, broad and genuine, was a beacon that sent a surprising warmth spreading through Eris's chest. "Good morning, Eris," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. He remembered her name. A tiny, delightful shock. "Good morning," she replied, her voice a little softer than usual. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a sensation she hadn't experienced since childhood. "The usual, please." He nodded, already reaching for her preferred blend of coffee beans. "Slept well?" he asked, his eyes twinkling as he watched her. Eris paused. "Surprisingly, yes," she admitted. "Or rather, I awoke refreshed." She searched for the right word, a more scientific term for the flutter of excitement she felt, but found none. "And you?" "Always," he chuckled, sliding a steaming mug across the counter, its rich aroma filling the air. "The smell of baking bread is a lullaby for the soul, wouldn't you agree?" Eris considered this. "I hadn't thought of it that way," she mused. "I suppose my lullabies have always been the hum of distant galaxies, or the rhythmic pulse of a dying star." She found herself sharing a piece of her world, something she rarely did with strangers. He leaned against the counter, listening intently. "Sounds vast," he said, a thoughtful expression on his face. "But I imagine there's a quiet beauty in that too, like the quiet of the early morning before the town wakes, when it's just me and the dough, and the stars still bright outside the window." Their eyes met, and in that shared moment of quiet understanding, Eris felt a connection deepen. A bridge spanning the vastness between galaxies and loaves of bread. She took a sip of her coffee, the warmth spreading through her, mirroring the warmth in her heart. Later that week, their morning exchanges grew longer, richer. Eris found herself lingering, drawn into conversations that ventured far beyond astrophysics or the perfect crust. The baker, whose name she now knew was Elias, had a gentle curiosity that disarmed her usual academic reserve. He asked about her work with a genuine interest that surprised her. "So, you're looking at what exactly?" he'd asked one morning, wiping flour from his apron. "Distant worlds, how they form." Eris, usually concise to the point of bluntness, found herself wanting to explain, to share the wonder she felt. "We're searching for exoplanets, worlds orbiting other stars, trying to understand their atmospheres, their potential for life. It's like looking for a grain of sand on a vast beach, but knowing that each grain holds a universe of possibility." Elias listened, his head tilted, a thoughtful frown on his brow. "A grain of sand," he repeated slowly. "That's profound. Like how each grain of flour is essential for a perfect loaf. Each tiny component contributing to something much larger, much more complex." He paused, then smiled. "Do you ever feel small looking at all that?" Eris considered this. "Not small exactly," she clarified. "More connected to something immense. It helps put things into perspective. My own problems, the fleeting nature of our lives. It all becomes a part of a larger, grander narrative." "A grander narrative," Elias echoed, his gaze soft as he looked at her. "I like that. I suppose baking is my own way of connecting to something grand. The ancient craft, the cycle of life, the simple joy of feeding people." Their conversations were like two rivers, flowing from different sources, gradually converging, finding shared currents. He spoke of the precise alchemy of yeast and water, the delicate balance of temperature and time, the patient artistry required to coax dough into a perfect golden loaf. Eris, in turn, found herself describing the elegance of orbital mechanics, the mesmerizing dance of celestial bodies, the thrilling pursuit of dark matter. She discovered a surprising joy in simplifying complex concepts for him, watching his eyes light up with understanding. One crisp afternoon, as the autumn leaves began to turn the town into a canvas of fiery reds and burnished golds, Elias suggested, "There's a small craft fair down by the lake this Saturday. They'll have local honey, handmade cheeses, and a surprisingly good apple fritter stand. Would you perhaps like to go?" Eris, who usually spent her Saturdays immersed in data analysis or telescope maintenance, felt a jolt of surprise, followed by a rush of something akin to delight. "A craft fair," she repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. He chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "Yes, it's very terrestrial, I admit. But sometimes even astrophysicists need a break from the cosmos, don't they?" She found herself smiling, a genuine, unforced smile. "I suppose so. Yes, Elias, I would like that very much." The Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, painted with the crisp air of early autumn. Iris found herself dressing with an extra layer of care, choosing a soft, knitted sweater that felt comforting and warm. Meeting Elias by the lake, she felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, a nervous excitement she hadn't known she possessed. He was there already, leaning against a centuries-old oak tree, its leaves a riot of amber and scarlet. He wore a simple plaid shirt that made him look even more approachable, more grounded. "Good morning, Iris," he greeted, his smile warm. "Ready for some earthly delights?" "As I'll ever be," she replied, a lightness in her tone. They walked through the bustling fair, the air filled with the scent of wood smoke, roasted nuts, and cinnamon. Elias pointed out stalls, sharing anecdotes about the local artisans, his familiarity with the town and its people, a stark contrast to her own detached observation. He bought her a warm apple fritter, its sugar-dusted surface giving way to soft, spiced apple within. Iris, usually preferring precise nutrition to spontaneous treats, found herself savoring every bite. "This is remarkably good," she confessed, a dusting of powdered sugar on her nose. Elias laughed, a genuine hearty sound that made her own lips curve upwards. "I told you, these fritters are legendary." He reached out, his thumb gently brushing the sugar from her nose. The brief, unexpected touch sent a jolt through Iris, a warmth that bloomed outward from her skin. She froze for a split second, her logical mind attempting to process the sudden surge of sensation before simply letting herself feel it. They wandered past stalls selling handmade pottery, intricately carved wooden figures, and jars of vibrant preserves. Iris found herself captivated by the earthy textures and vibrant colors, a stark contrast to the sterile precision of her lab. Elias, noticing her fascination with a particularly iridescent piece of pottery, bought it for her. "A little piece of terrestrial beauty for your office," he said, pressing the cool, smooth object into her hand. "To remind you of the ground beneath your feet, even when your head is in the stars." Iris looked at the small, glazed bowl, its colors shifting like a miniature nebula. "Thank you, Elias," she said, her voice soft with genuine appreciation. "It's beautiful." It was the first gift she had received that wasn't a scientific journal or a piece of equipment. It felt incredibly personal. As the afternoon waned, they found a quiet bench overlooking the lake, the water shimmering under the soft autumn light. Ducks glided silently, leaving ripples that spread outwards, mirroring the widening circles of Iris's own emotional landscape. "You know," Iris began, her gaze fixed on the distant shore, "I haven't done anything like this before. Spending time with someone outside of a professional context." She hesitated, feeling a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to display. "My life has always been singular, focused. The universe is a demanding mistress." Elias turned to her, his expression gentle, devoid of judgment. "And a fascinating one, I'm sure. But even the most brilliant minds need connection, Iris. We're social creatures, after all. It's in our nature, like the yeast needing warmth to rise." She looked at him then, truly looked at the kindness in his eyes, the understanding etched on his face. "I'm not very good at it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "At human connection. I understand the physics of it, the biological imperatives, but the actual practice. It's uncharted territory for me." He smiled, a reassuring warmth in his gaze. "Then consider me your guide, if you'll allow it. We can navigate this new territory together. There's no rush, no pressure. Just discovery." He reached out, and this time his hand gently covered hers where it rested on the bench. His touch was firm, warm, and comforting, a silent promise of support. Iris didn't pull away. Instead, a strange sense of peace settled over her, a quiet acceptance of this new, tender exploration. That evening, as the first stars began to prick holes in the darkening canvas of the sky, Iris found herself looking at them with a different perspective. They were still magnificent, still beckoned with their cosmic mysteries, but now they also seemed to twinkle with a softer, more intimate light. She thought of Elias, of his hand over hers, of his words, "Just discovery." And she realized that the greatest discovery she might ever make wasn't in the farthest reaches of space, but in the quiet, expansive landscape of her own heart. A few days later, a small, unassuming brown paper bag appeared on her desk at the observatory. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a warm, still steaming pastry she recognized as Elias's signature cinnamon roll, along with a small handwritten note. Each for the demanding mistress. Hope this helps keep her happy. Her. In. Eris felt a flush of warmth spread through her. A silent, thoughtful gesture that spoke volumes. She took a bite of the roll, its sweet, spiced warmth melting in her mouth, a comforting counterpoint to the cold analytical data on her screens. It was a tangible link to the world outside her scientific bubble, a delicious reminder of the growing connection she was forging. Inspired, Eris decided it was her turn to share her world. That evening, after a particularly clear day, she sent Elias a simple text. "Why the sky is exceptionally clear tonight. I'm doing some observations. Would you like to see the stars up close?" His reply was immediate. "I be there in 20. Don't start without me." When he arrived at the observatory, the vast dome open to the night sky, Eris felt a nervous flutter. She led him inside, the cool air of the facility a stark contrast to the warmth of his bakery. The hum of the machinery, the faint glow of computer screens, the silent majesty of the giant telescope pointed skyward. This was her sanctuary, her universe. "Welcome to my office," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. Elias looked around, his eyes wide with awe. "This is incredible, Eris. It's bigger than I imagined." He walked around the telescope, his fingers tracing the cool metal, a respectful wonder in his gaze. Eris guided him to the eyepiece. "Tonight we're looking at the Andromeda Galaxy," she explained, adjusting the focus. "Our nearest galactic neighbor, over 2 million light-years away." He leaned in, his breath catching. "Oh, wow," he breathed, his voice hushed. "It's beautiful, like a swirling cloud of light." She watched him, watching the universe. In his expression, she saw not just awe, but a genuine sense of wonder, a reflection of her own passion. "Each point of light is a star," she explained softly. "Billions of them, each one a sun, perhaps with its own planets, its own stories." He pulled away from the eyepiece, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the control panel. "It makes my bread feel rather small in comparison." Eris shook her head. "No, Elias. It makes it feel connected. The same atoms that form the stars, the planets, the dust clouds, they also form the flour in your hands, the yeast that makes it rise, the air we breathe. We are all stardust, after all." She paused, then added, "And the simple act of creating something, of bringing warmth and sustenance and joy into the world, that's just as profound as understanding the cosmos. In its own way, it's a form of creation, too." He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the faint starlight, a depth of emotion in them that made Eris' breath hitch. "You have a way of seeing the world, Eris, that's truly extraordinary." Later, they sat outside on a bench, sipping hot cocoa Eris had prepared, the chill of the night air softened by their shared warmth. The stars above them were a glittering tapestry, no longer just objects of scientific study but silent witnesses to a burgeoning connection. "Thank you for showing me this, Eris," Elias said, his voice quiet. "It's humbling and inspiring." "Thank you for being willing to see it," she replied, her gaze fixed on the Milky Way, a faint luminous band across the sky. "It means a lot to me to share it." She felt a warmth spread through her, a quiet contentment that was more profound than any intellectual satisfaction. The following weeks unfolded like a gently turning page in a beloved book. Their mornings at the bakery became a cherished ritual. He'd often have a new pastry for her to try, a special blend of coffee, or a local newspaper article he thought might interest her. Eris, in turn, found herself seeking out small ways to show her appreciation. A particularly interesting article on astrophotography she printed out for him, a quick email about a meteor shower that would be visible that night. They started having dinner together a few times a week, sometimes at her small, surprisingly cozy cottage, sometimes at his charming apartment above the bakery, filled with the lingering scent of warm bread and old books. Eris, who had previously preferred the solitude of her own company, found herself looking forward to these evenings with an eagerness that startled her. She discovered Elias was an avid reader of history and philosophy, and their conversations often stretched late into the night, ranging from ancient civilizations to the ethics of artificial intelligence. He possessed a quiet wisdom, a grounded perspective that complemented her boundless, cosmic curiosity. He listened to her with an attentiveness that made her feel truly heard, truly understood for the first time in her life. One evening, after a particularly engaging discussion about the paradoxes of time travel, they sat in comfortable silence in her living room, the only sound the soft crackle of the fireplace. Eris felt a quiet peace settle over her, a deep sense of belonging that was both new and incredibly comforting. "I'm glad you came to this town, Eris," Elias said, breaking the silence, his voice soft. She turned to him, her heart doing a strange, gentle flip. "Me too, Elias," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "More than you know." She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm, a tentative, yet deliberate gesture. He responded instantly, his hand turning to gently clasp hers. His touch was warm, reassuring, and filled with a tenderness that brought a sudden, unexpected sting to her eyes. She looked at their joined hands, then up at him, her gaze searching his. There was a silent understanding passing between them, a recognition of the profound shift that had occurred in both their lives. The universe, once an endless, cold expanse, now felt intimately connected to the warmth of his hand, the kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength of his presence. The night outside was deep, a velvet cloak studded with distant stars, but within Eris's cottage, a new light was steadily growing, radiating a gentle warmth that promised not just another dawn, but a lifetime of shared mornings, shared discoveries, and the sweet, unfolding chapters of a terrestrial romance unlike any she could have ever predicted. And she knew, with a certainty as profound as any scientific truth, that this was just the beginning. The universe, in all its immensity, had brought them together, and she was ready for whatever constellations their path would form next. The universe, in all its immensity, had brought them together, and she was ready for whatever constellations their path would form next. The early days were a dance of discovery, each step tentative yet brimming with unspoken joy. Lyra, whose life had been meticulously catalogued in data points and empirical evidence, found herself navigating a world where the most profound truths defied measurement. Leo, with his eyes that held the depth of nebulae and a quiet grace that seemed to hum with ancient starlight, was an enigma she no longer wished to solve, but simply to experience. They settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and utterly miraculous. Mornings often began with them side by side on the small porch, coffee steaming in the crisp air, watching the sun paint the sky. Lyra would share anecdotes from her astrophysics journals, her voice alight with passion, and Leo would listen, his gaze fixed on her, sometimes offering insights that were breathtaking in their simplicity and cosmic scope. He spoke of the song of the photons and the memory held in dark matter, phrases that made her scientific mind reel, yet resonated with a deeper, intuitive understanding she hadn't known she possessed. He seemed to absorb human experiences with an almost childlike wonder, yet processed them with the wisdom of eons. A simple rain shower could captivate him for an hour, his fingers tracing the rivulets on the window pane, murmuring about the journey of water, a dance from ocean to sky and back again. He learned to cook, his movements precise and unhurried, infusing even the most mundane meal with a sense of ceremony. Lyra found herself laughing more freely, her usual academic seriousness melting away under his gentle influence. He saw the world, and by extension, her, with a clarity that stripped away pretense and celebrated raw, beautiful existence. One evening, as they lay on a blanket in the meadow behind the cottage, the sky a velvet canvas studded with diamonds, Lyra finally voiced the question that had lingered between them, like an unspoken star chart. "Leo," she began, her voice soft, where did you come from? Truly." He turned to her, his profile illuminated by the faint glow of the Milky Way. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. "I am from the light, Lyra. The light that travels across galaxies, the light that awakens the first atom, the light that sparks life. I am a whisper of the cosmic breath, given form by the very desire to witness. And when I saw your light, burning so brightly, searching the heavens with such fierce devotion, I knew I had to find you." His words weren't a scientific explanation, not in the way her mind was trained to accept. There were no coordinates, no verifiable origins. Yet, they were the most profound truths she had ever heard. It wasn't about being an alien in a spaceship, or a mythical being. It was about being a manifestation of the very wonder she dedicated her life to studying. He was the embodiment of the universe's quiet magic, a living poem. A tremor went through her, not of fear, but of an overwhelming, exquisite love. This wasn't a romance she could publish in a peer-reviewed journal, but it was a truth etched into her very soul. "And why stay?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Why here, with me?" His hand found hers, his touch warm, solid, and utterly real. "Because here, Lyra, the light sings a different song. A song of touch, of laughter, of shared silence. A song of a human heart beating with such vibrant rhythm. My existence was boundless, but without anchor. You are my anchor. You are the specific, beautiful melody within the grand symphony." Tears pricked Lyra's eyes, blurring the star-strewn sky. She felt a shift within her, a profound acceptance that transcended logic. Her scientific mind, which had once demanded proof, now simply believed. It wasn't about abandoning science. It was about expanding it, understanding that some truths existed beyond the realm of instruments and equations, residing instead in the vast, boundless territory of the heart. Yet, even in this celestial harmony, there were human elements to navigate. Leo, for all his cosmic wisdom, was still learning the nuances of terrestrial existence. He sometimes struggled with the concept of time, of deadlines, of the small, insistent pressures of human society. He'd occasionally drift into a state of deep contemplation, lost in the patterns of a leaf or the trajectory of a bird, making Lyra gently remind him of an appointment or a task. One afternoon, Lyra received an email from her university. A prestigious grant opportunity, requiring extensive travel and collaboration with international observatories. It was a career-defining chance, exactly the kind of breakthrough she had always dreamed of. She read it, her heart a tangled knot of excitement and trepidation. How could Leo, who felt such a deep connection to their simple cottage and the immediate world around them, adapt to such a demanding globe-trotting life? She found him in the garden, speaking in soft tones to a wilting rosebush, his touch seeming to revive its drooping petals. He turned as she approached, his eyes immediately sensing her turmoil. "A new constellation has appeared in your inner sky, Lyra," he observed gently. "One that brings both dazzling light and a shadow of worry." She showed him the email, explaining the significance, her voice laced with an anxiety she couldn't hide. "It's everything I've worked for, Leo, but it would mean months away, living in different places, constantly moving. I don't know if it's fair to ask you to adapt to that, or if I can adapt to that, or if why not a lot." Leo listened, his gaze thoughtful. He plucked a single perfect rosebud and offered it to her. "Lyra," he began, "my existence is not bound by a single point in space. It is bound by you. Where your light shines brightest, there I wish to be. If your path leads you across continents, then my understanding of home will expand to encompass the entire globe, as long as you are at its center." He took her hands, his touch grounding and reassuring. "I came to witness, to learn, to experience, and to love. To see the world through your eyes, to share in your passion. That is the greatest discovery I could ever make. Do not dim your own light for fear of mine. My nature is to embrace the journey wherever it may lead." His words were a balm, a testament to a love so profound it transcended even her wildest imaginings. It wasn't a love that demanded sacrifice of self, but one that celebrated and amplified each other's truest desires. She realized then that her fear wasn't about Leo's inability to adapt, but her own lingering doubt that such an extraordinary being could truly choose the ordinary, messy, beautiful life she offered. He had chosen it, wholeheartedly. With renewed courage, Lyra accepted the grant. Their life transformed, becoming a beautiful mosaic of shared adventures. Leo, with his uncanny ability to connect with nature and his deep, intuitive understanding of patterns, proved to be an invaluable companion. He helped her conceptualize complex data in new ways, offering perspectives that unlocked breakthroughs in her research. He adapted to bustling cities with a serene curiosity, finding beauty in the geometry of skyscrapers and the diverse tapestry of human interaction. They traveled from the observatories nestled high in the Chilean Andes, where the stars seemed close enough to touch, to the ancient ruins of Greece, where Leo spoke of the echoes of cosmic energy in the very stones. He learned to navigate airports, to appreciate different cuisines, and even developed a fondness for human music, especially the melancholic beauty of jazz. He was not just accompanying her, he was enriching her world, and she, in turn, was grounding his boundless existence in the warmth of human connection. Their cottage remained their sanctuary, their anchor point. It was there, during one quiet winter evening, curled by the crackling fire, that Lyra found herself reflecting on the journey. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had not just sent her a partner. It had sent her a lens through which to see everything anew. Her science was no longer just about cold data. It was infused with wonder, with poetry, with the vibrant pulse of life and love. "You know," she murmured, tracing patterns on his hand, "my colleagues often ask about my sudden leaps in intuition, my new theories. They say I've found a new way to listen to the universe." Leo smiled, his eyes twinkling like distant stars. "Perhaps you have simply learned to listen with a different part of yourself, Lyra. The part that knows a star's heart, not just its spectral signature." She looked at him, her heart overflowing. He was her star, her universe, her most profound discovery. Their love wasn't just a terrestrial romance. It was a cosmic one, a quiet testament to the boundless possibilities of connection, a bridge between the known and the unknowable. Years turned into a tapestry of shared dawns and dusks. The cottage remained a haven, its windows always open to the starlit sky, its garden blooming with the vibrant energy Leo seemed to impart to every living thing. Lyra continued her research, her name becoming synonymous with groundbreaking insights, her work consistently pointing towards the interconnectedness of all things, a truth Leo had embodied from their very first meeting. Their love story wasn't one for the history books or for scientific journals. It was a quiet legend, woven into the fabric of their lives, whispered by the rustling leaves of the meadow, and witnessed by the silent, ever-watching stars. It was a love that proved the universe was not just a cold, indifferent expanse, but a realm of infinite possibility, capable of crafting the most unexpected and beautiful connections. And as Lyra lay her head on Leo's chest one night, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, a rhythm that was both utterly human and resonated with the ancient pulse of creation, she knew, with a certainty that surpassed all scientific proof, that their terrestrial romance, born under a cosmic gaze, was a masterpiece in the making. Every shared breath, every whispered secret, every silent moment under the vast star-dusted sky was a new constellation forming. Their journey, a dance between science and magic, between Earth and stars, was just beginning to unfold its most beautiful, heartwarming chapters, under the watchful, loving eye of a universe that had truly brought them home.